Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Painless Universal Conversation with myself and Welsh. Today we'll be talking about getting on the property market. How do you take your passion, something you really want to do into a real career? What are some of the pains and challenges that come out from doing this business to make it a success? My guest today, Nicole, will be telling us about her challenges and how she found joy along the way. Let me tell you a little bit about who my guest Nicole is. Nicole is a mother of three who went from being a stay-at-home mom, running properties of over 120 million pounds in just 5 years, to now finding her own purpose, where she's finding her own joy doing what she truly loves. She'll be talking about some of the challenges of owning your own property investments, how to do it, how to start, and also, most importantly, how to sell your home so buyers find it attractive and appealing. Nicole, 10 years ago, she was at home raising her kids and unsure about what the future held. Fast forward to 2020, everyone knows what happened in 2020 when the pandemic hit. After 10 years on the property market, which saw her develop hundreds of property across London, she's taken the back seat and has left London and changed her focus. So she's built such a beautiful, amazing empire, and she'll be telling us why she's left London to take a back seat and shift her focus to something different. At first, the fast pace was exciting, of being a hands-on property developer was really good. She enjoyed traveling across to various sites in the construction and raising funds by crowdfunding. But in the last few years, this has changed. Now with the backdrop of the ballooning housing prices, her focus is creating homes that are fit for purpose, whether they're affordable or social housing. There's a clear requirement across the sector for the country to meet the demands. She still holds some property investment across the world, across the United Kingdom, London especially, but she's also more important is focusing on property auction, doing different things and sitting on various boards. And she's spending more quality time with her children, because one of the things we don't realize is that when we think of property pain, we think property is just something you could do and you just sit home and the money comes in. We don't think of the other challenges that it presents. My guest, Nicole, will be telling us about these challenges that come with investing in properties. I'm so honored that she's taken the time out of her busy schedule to talk to us. Meet my amazing guest, Nicole Bremner, as she speaks to us about challenges and the joy she's found along the way. Well, hello everyone, and welcome again to Painless Universal. You've heard my introduction, but I thought I would say this again. Today's conversation is one you must watch. If you're looking to diversify your career, you're thinking of what next? How do I add more income to my family? How do I help my family? My guest, as I said, did just that. She will tell us how she achieved all of that and how she found her success, how she overcome pains as well, because nothing in life is easy, but if you are consistent in it, if you're perseverant, you will get there. Nicole, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me, Anne. It's a real honor.
Your story is truly amazing, especially for so many women out there who, especially this pandemic, I think this pandemic has brought so many women questioning, how do I add value? Because a lot of people lost their jobs during this time. We always follow our husband, where is he going? And then we end up losing our jobs. We have the kids and we're not quite sure what do we do next to really add value. You've done all of that. You are an author, you're a podcast host now, you're an investor, you're a property developer. Before we get started, who are you?
That's a very good question, and it's one that I probably ask myself at least once a week. I sit there and go, who actually am I? But you said it there in that introduction. It's as women, and it is mainly women, we have to be so flexible with our careers. We do tend to follow our husbands around. We do need to take career breaks. I moved from Australia to London, London to New York, New York back to London, to follow a man and my husband at the time, and to and that had an impact on my career and on what I could do. And then when you have children, you take time out, and then you have to be flexible around those around the various commitments and priorities that you have. So what it does mean is that many men will just have one title, and this is what I find in corporate world, and they'll just be analyst or engineer or whatever it might be. But us women tend to have so many things, like you yourself. There is so many, you've got so many strings to your bow. So a very long-winded answer to who I am, I don't know, but I think I'm a mum that just happens to have done all these various things as well. And I happen to invest in startups, and I happen to have a podcast that I've had for, I think, nearly 5 years now. And I happen to have written a book. But yeah, that one word I would love to have, but I haven't quite got that yet.
Honestly, I think we all struggle with that word, and it's one of my questions I always have to start with, because I think it's a struggle question, because we're so many things. We sometimes just don't, we even lose track of who we are sometimes, because we're so many things. When you look at your background growing up, you're originally from Australia. You, as you said, you moved to United Kingdom. Then you've also worked in America. What in your background did you say gave you that perseverance to go into that property side? Can you think about your background? What was it like growing up?
Yeah, money was very tight. I'll be really frank and get straight to the point when it comes to money. My parents were both nurses. They had 4 children, and it was tight. We never went without though. My parents then separated, and my mother she would go without or work extra jobs, work extra night shifts in order to ensure that we went to private school, if you can believe that. We got really good sibling discounts. But for example, we didn't eat meat. My parents didn't smoke, they didn't drink, because all of these things are quite expensive. So they made lots of sacrifices so that they could put us through and have a really good education. And that was because, like all parents, they wanted us to have a better life than they had and not to struggle so much. So I think it was seeing this work ethic of my mother and seeing how hard she worked and how fiercely independent she was, that I thought, I never want to struggle like that. And with property in particular, my parents had always renovated their own properties. They'd built their own home as well from scratch. My father actually working on the building site. Even now, my mother and her husband are building their own eco home in the lovely hinterland of Australia and New South Wales. So it's always been something we've done. It's just this attitude that, yeah, you go in and you roll up your sleeves and you get stuck into property. And that kind of shaped the way that I looked at property and why I wanted to get involved.
Yeah, because it's very difficult to get into property, something I've always thought about. And when I think about it, I think I immediately take 20 steps backwards. I think that this is not for me. This is very, very complicated world to be in. Your early days, anyone who will not believe it, because you are actually a banker. You started working at Austria Bank to Goldman Sachs. So you're really a banker. What are some of the lessons of disciplines that you learned from being a banker?
Well, first of all, financial skills. And I think that I had a friend who was an analyst in a medical sector. And when he was recruiting, he said, I need someone with a solid finance background, because the medical side I can teach someone, but unless someone's had that very solid financial background, it's very hard to find people who have that. So for me, it was understanding balance sheets, understanding cash flow, understanding the profit and loss, and all of those things, how they work together. So that was the first thing. Also, it was a really interesting lesson into having it all as women, because it was always a very male-dominated industry, which I didn't really mind. I tend to get along very well with men. I've got 3 brothers, and I tend to get along probably slightly better with men than women. But what I found is the women that were very senior and very successful, all of them had stay-at-home husbands. And that to me was very interesting, and it kind of made me question this whole having it all. And I just thought, I always thought that I could have it all. I could have the family, I could have the career, and I could have the flexibility. And it kind of made me question that, okay, so these women are giving up something of their family life in order to have this professional life. And where will the balance be for me? And what does having it all mean to me? And yeah, it was a very interesting lesson that I didn't expect to come from banking, but one that most certainly did.
Oh, I like what you said, because actually thinking about it, a lot of women who are very successful have stay-at-home husbands. And actually, I've actually questioned that as well, because we always say having it all. It's either the men who are successful have stay-at-home wives or vice versa. So what does having it all mean? I think we have to change that concept of having it all. Having it all really means having one parent at home as well, and it's okay. That might also be a good definition of having it all. The birth of your third child, your daughters, made you feel a little bit lost. You thinking, I think every mother who has the first one, second one, and third one is always a really eye opener. But that one she made you feel lost, and you had no idea what to do with life. What did you do to try to land your property investments after the birth of your third daughter? And what's her name, by the way?
Her name's Romy.
Romy.
She's an absolute delight. And I actually thought that I was having a third boy when I looked at the scan. So I was fine with that. You know, I've got 3 brothers. I'd be fine with 3 boys. And so when she was born and she was a girl, I was just, oh, I don't know what to do with girls. But yeah, she's an absolute delight and incredibly sassy. But yeah, so my property started a bit before, well, it started before I had children, actually, because I bought a flat in Clerkenwell with my then husband, and we renovated it. And then when we went over to New York, we let it out, came back. Properties are always tired after they've had tenants for a couple of years. So renovated it again and put it on the market, and it doubled in price. Over the sort of, I think, 6 years that we'd owned it, it had doubled. And I thought, wow, this property thing, great. And I found when my second child was just born, I found this dilapidated, derelict vicarage in Hackney and fell in love with it. And on the day we viewed it, we offered on it and had sealed the purchase. So that was my first step into proper development, because this needed full renovation, and it was just such an exciting project and process, and I loved it. And that then gave me the idea that maybe I could look at doing this professionally. So then when my daughter was born, that's when I was doing it in a more professional way, and I was purchasing projects to then renovate into luxury family homes all around the Hackney and Islington area and selling them on. So I would take Romy onto building sites. I know it's really dangerous, but I'd have her in the carrier in front of me, and I'd have her on building sites, and I'd just be talking with the builders and discussing various things. And actually, this is perhaps too much information, but I'm Australian and that's what we do. But I learned how to feed her on the go. So I would be able just to lift up my top a little bit, pull down various bits of blanket and jackets, and feed her underneath my top, and no one would know. And I used to call it in-flight refueling. So I could just be in a meeting and no one would know that I was feeding my baby.
Yeah, that is that is definitely mommy's superpower.
Yeah.
Mommy's superpower. Only mothers can come up with something like this.
Hands free. Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh. And so you were saying, but you also mother of 3, then you stumbled on the property development, right? Because you tried on other things. It's not like it came, it just, I know you started this one in Hackney and it was amazing, but you were also trying other things. You were a blogger. I think you have a list of other line of things you've got your hands in. Why did you feel that was not the right niche area to focus on, those other bits you were doing?
It was just that it was right at the time of cupcakes and knitting. It was when that was really fashionable. And I seemed to just follow every trend. Honestly, I would say, oh, I'm going to do cupcakes. And I'd start making cupcakes for everyone. And everyone would say, right, stop with the cupcakes. And I was vegan. So I'd do all these vegan cakes and I'd photograph them all. And I had a little food blog going on. And I went to food bloggers, seminars and conferences and all sorts of things. So it was really fun. And then with knitting, while I was living in New York, I was pregnant and didn't know what to do with my time. So stumbled into a knitting shop, started knitting there and started teaching people how to knit. So it was fun. It was just a way of me meeting other people and forming friendships over there. And yeah, so that was some of the many things that I did. But I think what the main factor was that they would take the same amount of time, but I wouldn't generate any money from them. And it was kind of, I'd be quite disappointed when I'd put all this effort in and not make any money off the back of my efforts. Whereas with property, I could put effort in, I can invest my money, and I could see the rewards very clearly. And especially in 2013, 14, 15, the property market in Hackney was going crazy. And so I made a lot of money, and that was really rewarding, because as much as we like to say it's only money, it's money, and it does give us a certain boost and identity and all sorts of things that can be quite dangerous as well.
Yeah, no, it also gives you that confidence, especially it shows your hard work is finally paying off. Something is actually going in the right direction. It gives you that confidence that actually I'm doing something that's finally right. You learned a lot of lessons along the way. Can you share with us some of the lessons that you learned from this property world? This is not easy for anyone.
Don't go into property. Maybe that's the first one I learned. No, I think, and this is the benefit of hindsight. And I went into property, I thought, with my eyes wide open. I'm in my early 40s now. I'd been in banking. I'd seen the Asian crisis when I was in Australia. I'd seen the oil crisis also when I was in Australia. I then came to the UK during the dot-com bubble bursting and saw that virtually the whole population of London the whole population of the town I grew up in was made redundant after that, the bursting of the dot-com bubble in London. Just thousands of people lost their jobs. So I saw that. I then saw the 2008, 7-8 credit crunch. Actually, my first day at Goldman Sachs was in September 2018, on the day that Lehman Brothers crashed. And I was sitting there at Goldman on Wall Street, which was a dream, watching the Fox and CNBC as these poor people from Lehman Brothers were carrying out their boxes. And so I'd seen all this. I knew that property was cyclical, and I knew that I would have to be careful. And what then happens is you go in and you become a little bit intoxicated by it, I think. And I think many people who go into property become a little evangelical about it. And it's, yeah, property is the best thing ever. And I put this money in and I make all this money. I'm sorry, but it's not. If you factor in your time, if you factor in the interest costs, and then what no one talks about either is the tax. Property is an incredibly highly taxed asset class compared to things like investing by your ISA or various other wrappers that there are, pensions and things like that. So I think if people are really honest with themselves, no one is making as much money as they think they are in property. And if you are, you've been in it for a very long time and you're being very conservative with what you're doing. And I wasn't being quite so conservative. I was saying, yeah, that's an exciting project. I'll buy it. That's what an exciting one. I'll buy that. And I built up this team, and I kind of had this belief that my team would get me through. And it was a real wake-up call when the market did turn. And I realized that my team weren't quite as strong as I thought they were. And me and the team had just taken on far too much than we had the systems in place to deal with. So that was a very difficult process. It still is a very difficult process. We're still working our way out of that. But as far as, I think that's my lesson, is that you can go into property, but don't buy yourself a job, because it's a very risky and expensive way of just buying yourself a job. And think about, a lot of people go in thinking that they're going to quit their day job and just invest everything into property. There are other ways of doing it. Why not stick with what you're good at. If you're an engineer, stick with being an engineer. And if you've got some spare money, let a professional project manager go and manage that on a salary and do what they do best. You're not instantly an expert on property. So it took me a good 10 years to work out that. It's probably another very long-winded answer, sorry, Anne, but
No, it's not.
it's tough. It's tough.
Because what you're saying is really, really things that we don't really think about. Everyone, and you've just said it in plain black and white. And a lot of people say, oh, invest in this property is amazing, you make this much money, but no one really tells you the behind the scene, the real difficult things you don't see in investing in a property. So I really wanted you to just take your time to answer that part of the question. This was something I needed to hear, and I'm sure most of the guests who are going to watch this show today will want to hear. But you talk about staging. One of the success that you had from property, I mean, from your headline, from stay-at-home parent to 120 million property mogul in just 5 years. One of the success thing that came out of this is that you have this ability to stage a property and make it buyers, when they come into this place, they want to invest in this property. And not only that, you had a good business partner. Why is it so important that you choose a good business partner, one? And secondly, why is it important about what the staging, what does it do in someone wanting to put their money into a property?
Yeah, so number of questions there, and just to clarify the 120 million. So at one point, so in probably 2017, when the market was at its peak, we had over 120 million worth of property that we'd invested in. So that wasn't my share of it. I had a share of that, but I didn't have all of that. That was as a group. So that's the first thing. Secondly, just to carry on from the previous question, I think what it is everyone lives in a house. And so what it means is that everyone believes that they're an expert in a house just because they live in one. And I think that that's really important to understand. It's kind of like people saying, well, I've watched so many botched plastic surgery programs that I now think that I could perform plastic surgery or cosmetic surgery, sorry, or I've watched all these true crime shows, so I believe that I could solve any crime out there and carry out forensics. And it's just not true. And I think that's what people get carried away with is, I live in a house, I've always lived in a house, therefore I know how to renovate a house, I know how to do everything in a house, and I'm an expert. So I think that's quite important to point out, is that it takes a lot to be an expert, as I found out, probably to my detriment. But then to answer your next question about partners. Now, it is so difficult to pick the right partner. If you think about the biggest life decision that you make, which is your life partner, even that we can get so wrong, or we just change our hopes and dreams and aspirations. They change as we age at times. And I always feel very it's lovely when people have found someone and they can change and grow with them as life meanders on, but that doesn't happen for everyone. So you think about nearly 40-something% of marriages end in divorce, and that doesn't even take into account common law partnerships. So if we can't get something as fundamental as our marriage is right, our life partner's right, how do we ensure that we're getting our business partners right? And I think what that comes down to is kind of like a prenup. And that is that you have this watertight document in place that outlines every single eventuality, that is looked at or that is drafted by a very experienced solicitor who only deals with, say, property. And you make sure that it's kept up to date, it's reviewed annually by both partners or all interested parties. So then it gives everyone this peace of mind that what they are doing is right and they're still journeying together in the same way. And I think that's incredibly important, because as I was just saying to a friend yesterday, we're both involved in legal disputes at the moment. And both of us were just saying that we wish we could tell people to spend the money initially, putting all of this in place, because it would save them so much grief and money as well at the if these partnerships ever come undone. So you just think about how nice it would be if you had a mechanism in which you could divorce amicably with allocating everyone what is theirs. And that's what you need to have. It's this exit strategy for every partner at various points along that journey. And I think that really is the best thing that you can find in a partner, is someone that complements you where you are. And everyone says this is nothing new, but have someone that complements you. I'm a visionary that needs bringing down to earth because I'm great at coming up with all these ideas, but then I get really bored in the implementation. And so I need someone then who can come along and implement those ideas and be a lot more organized than I am. I am excellent at outsourcing. I can outsource everything, but then something will go wrong and I go, oh, I shouldn't have outsourced quite so much. I should have been more involved in these decisions. So it's having people that are really complementary with you and your personality, and truly understanding yourself and your weaknesses. There's no point having a stronger weakness. You just play with your strengths and find other people to fill those gaps. So I think that's the key, is just to pre-plan for every eventuality and cover off every risk and review that on an annual basis. And if your partner doesn't want to do that, they're not the right partner. And then to answer your staging question, yeah, I guess I've just got my own view and I like things that I like. And we were talking before about my pictures, and my pictures are just from IKEA. And I really thought that it was going to be a nice little colouring in project for me to do with my children. And they decided self and thought, I'm going to frame these. So I've got my own style. And it is very difficult when you've got your own style and you want to impart that on a project so that it is neutral and enough people find it appealing and can go into a property and go, I don't want to change anything. And sometimes it works. And there was one particular project in Islington in 2000, and I think it was about 13, 14 that I did. And this quite famous musician walked in and just said, I love this. I want everything. Can you sell me all the furniture? And I said, yeah, for this price, you can have everything. So he moved in with everything, because we'd put the sheets on the bed, we'd put cutlery in there, everything to stage this property. And he just moved in, and it was so good. Whereas other people, another very famous person, actually, I can say this, it was David from Friends. He nearly bought one of my properties in Hackney, and I met him and took him through this property, and he put forward an offer and I rejected it stupidly because I ended up selling it for less. But anyway, one of the conditions was his wife wanted all the kitchen and flooring to be ripped up that I'd put in and replaced. Now, I'd staged this property, I'd put in a £40,000 bolt-hole kitchen, and the tiles alone had cost me, I can't remember, 12,000 or so. It was a lot of money, and they were beautiful, but she didn't want them. She didn't want modern and sleek. She wanted traditional country. So you can't please everyone, but you can just try to make things so that people can come into them and instantly picture themselves living in these particular properties. And that's all you can do.
So Nicole, you would say it's not about what you just said, because we all live in properties, we all live in houses. So sometimes we think it's what we want. So when it comes to property, I think one of the lessons one should learn is that property is actually a business. You have to sell. You can't sell what you want to live in. You have to sell what others will feel comfortable. Yeah. What would actually sell. I think this is one of the key lessons you got from this.
Yeah, and I've had that wrong. I've got that wrong before. There was one property in South Kensington that I had on the market for years. And it wasn't until later that I spoke to a specialist in that area, a specialist real estate consultant. And he just said, I don't know why no one told you this before, but it looked too Hackney for South Kensington. And that's why I think that it didn't sell. And I thought about it and I thought, you know what, I think you're right. I think that because I lived in Hackney and I thought the whole Hackney vibe was cool, I made it look like that. And that's not what the buyer in South Kensington wants. And I just felt that what was there was a little plain and I wanted to add to it. And yet the buyer likes that.
Right. That's really. I have to ask you. You're an author. You wrote the book, Brick It.
Yes, bricking it. Yeah.
Bricking it. What? I love the title, by the way. Bricking it. Why did you write the book, and what message were you advised did you convey in anyone who gets a copy of this book?
What I wanted to do was to provide a manual really for how I got started in property and the various aspects of property and how others could also get involved in property. And it's very much a how-to book, but also it's got my story in it. And so the reason that I wrote it is because I couldn't speak in this, I couldn't speak in public. I had this real fear of public speaking, as many people do. But just to go back a little bit, I was thinking about this podcast this morning and you and living in pain and how you live in pain. I was trying to think of examples in my life and times that I've really lived in pain. And one example is that when between my second and third child, I had a tumor diagnosed in the roof of my mouth. And once my little Romy was born, when she was old enough that I could leave her overnight, I went and had the roof of my mouth removed. And what that meant is that I had a hole directly from the roof of my mouth right through up into my nose area and down my throat. It was just a hole. So they had to create this prosthetic that looked like a dental plate, but much bigger. And they had to create this prosthetic that went into my mouth so it would cover up that hole, because otherwise every time I had a drink, it would just come straight out my nose because there was just a hole there. And you can imagine eating. So what it meant is that I had to have that in there for a year because the hole had to heal before they could then do the reconstructive surgery. And what that meant is that I'd had my third baby, so I was exhausted. I wasn't looking the way that I wanted to look. My body wasn't the way that I wanted to look. And also I couldn't speak properly. And so for a whole year, I hid and I lost so much confidence and I was in pain. I was genuinely in just a lot of pain every day from my mouth, and everyday things like talking and eating, brushing teeth, all of these things caused me pain. And it was not long after that I had the reconstructive surgery and it all healed. And I thought, and I didn't know how I was going to be able to speak again. It took me a while to relearn how my tongue would move around in my mouth as well. And I thought, I just don't think I've got a voice now. I don't think that I can speak in public. So it took a lot of effort to find my confidence and to get back out there and just not even back out there, just to get out there and speak. So it was during this time that I found my voice, and I found it addictive. I really did. I got up there on stage and I started speaking. I was so nervous and I loved the feeling. And so any opportunity to speak in front of women mainly, I just relished, because women was such a beautiful crowd, and I could tell my story and have this support of the women, and it really was intoxicating. So I was on this sort of speaking circuit, as they call it, and a woman came up to me after one and said, "You've got a great story. You can reach 20, 30, 100 people in a room if you tell your story. If you write it in a book, you can potentially reach thousands of women." And so I thought, that's a really good idea. And so that summer, I remember sitting by the pool, and I'd broken up with my husband. So it was me and my kids by the pool in France somewhere. And I rang a friend, James, who's a writer, and said, "How do you write a book?" And he said, "Right, you just need a beginning, an introduction, a conclusion, and then 10 hooks for each chapter." And I went, okay, I can do that. So I wrote the introduction, wrote the conclusion, and roughly wrote what the book was going to be about in each of those chapters. And then did a lot more research, and over the Christmas holidays that year, I wrote the book. But it really was about telling my story and also telling other people about how they too could get into property and invest in property.
That's really, really good, because I think sometimes we try to utilize the internet, YouTube, to find out advice, but you're not quite sure what advice is being given. But with you, you have got the experience, you know how, you know the pain that comes with investing in property is not easy. And this book as well paints it. So someone who doesn't have time to go on YouTube to find a good video could just listen, read your book and get the practical advice there. But one of the things I understand, I want you to give advice to, is people out there that are going to be listening and want to start their own property investment company. What would you say about how to start and finding the right property?
I would say that before you even start is to speak to an accountant or a financial advisor. And the reason is because you have to get the basics right. As I said earlier, it's a very tax inefficient structure. So depending on your income level, perhaps your partner's income level, you need to make sure that you're buying in the right structure before you even start. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is buy where you know. And a lot of people were talking years ago about investing in the north, for example, when they lived in the south, because there were higher yields and it's much cheaper and you could buy more. But it's almost a false economy, because you don't know the areas. You're relying on other people who are perhaps incentivized to sell you this property, regardless of whether it's a good investment or not. There's nothing like walking around your own area, or the area that you grew up in, or the area you went to university in, and learning every detail about that area, knowing the properties that are unkept, whether they're tenanted or whether they're owned by elderly people or younger people, what the demographics of a certain area are, whether it's students, older people, just what schools are in the catchment area. Yes, you can look that up, but you don't really know what the schools are like until you walk around. So there's a grammar school. There are 2 grammar schools across the road where I live now. One of them's a lovely grammar school where the students all seem really lovely. The other one, not so nice. And so even though they're right next to each other, I'd rather live on that side of the road closer to that grammar school than that side of the road. So you've just got to, you don't know these things unless you've spent a significant amount of time. And so that would be the second thing that I would do, is to do that. And then the third thing, which I detail quite a lot in my book, is the strategy that you wish to look at, because property is a very large umbrella, and there's buy to let, there's renovate and sell, there are HMOs, houses of multiple occupation, there are student lets, there's serviced accommodation. The list is endless. So it's about knowing, first of all, how much you've got to invest, and then how much time you've got to invest, because HMOs, for example, are very administrative. So are student accommodation and short-term lets or holiday lets. If you think about them, you've got your people coming in, people coming out constantly, you've got cleaning to do, and you've got all the bookings, you've got the advertising. All of that takes a lot of time. Whereas if you've got just a flat that you're letting, you deal with the tenants as they're coming in, and hopefully you don't have to deal with them again until they're going out, apart from a few bits of maintenance. So it just depends on what you've got. And then each of those have various tax treatments that you need to be aware of, which is why it's very important to get some good tax advice as well.
Wow. The pandemic, as you know, has hit so many people badly. People are in the process. Some people want to sell their home. But one of the things about selling a home, I think, is very tactical. You just can't just say you're putting your home on the market. What are some of the tips that you would give to anyone who has been hit by the pandemic and thinking, I think this is a good time for me to move, change your location, move out of London, for example, and move elsewhere? How do I sell my home? What tip would you give to anyone going through that challenge?
I think the first thing is to completely strip out the house of anything personal, and make sure there are no pictures on the walls. Make sure the stacks of filing in whatever on the kitchen table or wherever you have them, anything is just completely pared back. Get a storage unit, just put it all in storage. Things like children's bedrooms, you don't want them to look overly cluttered with toys, because people might not be able to, if they're older people without children, they might not want to see all those children's things in. It might just subconsciously change the way they think about it. It's all right to have a children's room, for example, but just try not to make it look too cluttered. Just strip everything out. Really think about how every part of the house looks, and just it's staging. It really is staging. And then the other thing is, just to mention, is do some repairs. And some people will say, well, you should let someone else come in and do those repairs. But there are two ways that people think that they're going to get a real bargain, and one is death and the other one is divorce. So if you go into a property that looks like it's been owned by an elderly person that's perhaps passed away, people think, aha, there's no one here to who wants to hang on to this property. The family need to sell this to go through the probate and distribute these funds. We've got a bargain. The other way is divorce. There's obviously this property needs to be sold so that the funds can be split through to the parties. And so again, people look at that and go, divorce. And usually if you go into a family looking home that's perhaps not well kept, it looks like a divorce situation. So even if it is a divorce situation, I would recommend just getting someone in to paint the walls, skim any bits of plaster that might need to be fixed. Make sure it's incredibly clean, clear, tidy, as perfectly as possibly staged. Make sure there's no house plants dying in corners, just things like that. Just make sure it looks really clean and presentable.
Yeah. These are things we honestly we take for granted. We don't know, but I think this will help so many people who might be going through a difficult time right now. You've shifted your career focus a little bit. You're more, you're doing a lot of your podcasts. You've shifted your, with the housing crisis, you've shifted your, what led you on that path to, and you just started by saying you've moved out of London now. What led you on that path?
Yeah, it was a real, I guess it was a time of difficulty, and I'll be very honest about this. 2017 was a highlight, and then everything just seemed to fall apart for me. My marriage of a number of over 1.5 decades broke down. Then I wasn't feeling like I was the right version of me. I felt like I just felt like I was turning into a person I didn't really like and I didn't want to be. And things started getting really challenging within the property portfolio. As I said before, we took on too much. We didn't have the systems in place, and it's very difficult to know when you've done that until you've reached overwhelm. We all do that. We say yes, 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 and all of a sudden it hits us, and we just think, oh no. And so it's easy to look back and say, I wish that I hadn't taken this on and this on. But in the moment, you do take them on. So then you've got to live with the repercussions of that. So I had nearly 200 investors. I'd raised over 6.5 million from crowdfunding for the projects. Things weren't going as they should. I noticed some irregularities within the companies. And it was really a challenging time. And also, I didn't think that I was being the mother that I wanted to be. And the reason that I went into property initially is so that I could be the mother that I wanted to be. And yet I'd gotten so busy, as we do, and so absorbed into this life of property that I wasn't being the mother that I wanted to be. And then very practically, I realized that I could be faced with 3 children at 3 different schools. And I thought, how am I going to manage this? Already one of my children's going to be catching a bus to get to his lovely school out in just on the border of Essex. And I thought, how am I going to manage this and how am I going to do it? So I started to look at schools outside of London. Also, there's a lot of knife crime in London, in Hackney, where I was living. And I was concerned about how quickly my children were growing up and what they were exposed to. My son was in year 7. He just moved into year 7, and he already knew what cocaine was and things like that. And I just thought, I didn't know what that was until I was in probably my early 20s, actually. I'd never even heard of it. I'd grown up a very sheltered life. And I thought, I don't want my children exposed to this. I want them to have a just a different life. And I was very fortunate that it was the end of 2019, so it was before lockdown. And I looked at schools in Essex, in Hertfordshire, in Kent, and I'd met a new partner in sort of 2018, and he was based in Kent, so it did make Kent a good option. And then I found the school that my children are now at, and I took the children along for the various meetings, and we all fell in love with the school. It was very nurturing. It's the second oldest school in the world, so it's got all this history. It's really, really nurturing. It's just a wonderful school. It's very balanced between academic, sporting, music. And then my daughter got a scholarship there. So it was just a really lovely fit. And we moved there, then lockdown happened and we were out in the countryside. So it was a good move actually, and fortuitous given the timings. There was a certain amount of serendipity there. And as I said to you, I really miss London, because when you move out, you say, yeah, I'm going to get up there once a week and see everyone, which I did for the first few months, and then it's lockdown happened and you sort of go back into your own little world. And now I'm trying to get out again and go up at least every week, every second week. But yeah, moving to the countryside was the right thing for me. Oh no, it was the right thing for my family. I'm still not sure it was the right thing for me personally, but it takes time to adjust to anything. And I think as adults, it's even harder for us to adjust when we move out of our zone where we have all our friends and now our network and our neighbors that we love, and move to a new place. And yeah, and I'm renting, which isn't ideal because I can't find the right house to buy. So yeah, it's an adjustment, and I'm trying to adjust to that slowly but surely.
You will, yeah. I think I love this new shift because a lot of people are doing that as well. I think the pandemic hit and a lot of people are reshifting, realigning, and property, as much as everyone thinks when you're in the property business is more flexible because you could do more, you have more time. In reality, it's not actually that as flexible as we think, because it's actually, you're still running a business, and the business needs to be nurtured, it needs to be looked after, it needs to have all this infrastructure in place to make sure the right things happen all the time. I will end with this quote, which comes from you. It's often said, what doesn't kill us make you stronger. How's this statement relevant to your own success story today?
Oh my goodness. I think if we're talking now about emotional pain, and I think that in life, we all go through our own time of trouble, I think. And I definitely went through a very, very dark time, probably 2019, early 2020. It was very, very difficult. And the benefit of that is that I have come out the other side, and every day is a new day and another step forward. Some are giant leaps backwards, but generally it's stepping forward. But what it's made me is definitely I've got more humility, and I've got more self-awareness and awareness of my limitations time-wise. I'm not so quick to take on everything, because I think what we do is that people ask us to do things, and it's a flattery thing. We feel flattered that people are asking us, oh, Nicole, we want you to be on the board of this, and we want you to be an ambassador for this. And you think, oh, this feels great, people want me. And what you've got to think is, yes, they want you, but what actually are you getting out of it? And when you've got a certain level of wealth or income, you think, okay, I might get an extra £1,000 for this, but is it really worth me spending that time on, or is that time better utilized somewhere else? So what's happened is I've learned to not take anything personally, including the positive things. So when people say, oh, I really want you to do this with us, we really want you to be a partner with us, I have to think, okay, don't let that get to you. Just keep going and keep focusing on the things that really matter, which ultimately are your family and your very close circle around you. So yeah, I'm a very different person than I was in 2017, 18, and arguably a better person. Definitely a better person. That humility suits me much better than perhaps and I'll be very honest, perhaps the intoxication that I had when I was flying high
Yeah.
on the success. So it's better to be this more humble person, even if sometimes it is painful and sometimes I mourn for the for the bright lights, I guess. But no, I am a better person, and it's humble.
No, that's really good. I love how you ended it. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I think everyone should always have that, because we've all gone through some hard times in our life. It doesn't matter when. It could be chronic illness pain, it could be divorce pain, it could be anything. But what doesn't kill you will only make you stronger. And you've said it very well. Thank you so much for this conversation. I really enjoyed talking to you. And I wish you all the best with everything. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. Thanks for being so brave in all you do.
Thank you.